Welcome to the Kings Beat podcast. I'm James Ham, your Kings Insider for ESPN 1320 and the Kings Beat. Joining me, Fox 40, Sean Cunningham. What's going on, Sean?
James, Brenden, good to see you. Good to be with you. Hope you have not experienced too much storm damage. I'm not liking it, as usual, but hope everyone's being safe out there because the state of California is a mess. We are not built for this. We will rebuild.
We will rebuild. I don't know what you guys are talking about. I built an ark up here. Okay, and of course we have Brenden Nunes from the Kings Pulse podcast. Brenden, how are you?
Doing good. Been very busy dealing with a bunch of storm damage things, but I guess it is what it is.
What happened?
Not myself personally. My day job is property management, and people just have their places totally messed up. So just been flooded with all that stuff recently is all. But glad to,
Pun intended?
Yes, absolutely.
Flooded. There it is.
But glad to talk some Kings basketball.
There we go. We do have a lot to talk about. It's been a kind of a crazy. We last reconvened on Thursday, and since then, the Kings lost a bad game, won a solid game, made some roster moves, added more questions to the rotation. There's plenty for us to jabber about here today.
But before we get to that,
yeah,
I have a follow up for Brenden.
Oh no.
Because of his phone calls keep coming in. I wonder because, this is qualifies as act of God stuff, like when trees fall down and property gets damaged and there's flooding. Do people call you and just curse you out like you're some telemarketer or some bill collector, like as if it's your fault? Or do they go, hey, we're having problem? Like they're nice about it? Like run me through your typical scenario.
It's more of the latter, but I think it's something like 300 doors that we have, and I swear you hear from the same 20 people. So if it's one of those 20 people, it's probably the first thing that you mentioned, that they're just generally not the most pleasant people to deal with. But more often than not, it's the latter. It's, hey, our fence has just fell down, and I have to nicely tell them, listen, somebody else has a tree through their building. This isn't necessarily an emergency right now. We're going to get on it, but
But my dog is going to get out if you don't build this fence.
Yeah.
The dog that they're not supposed to have, Sean. That's
Right.
Okay, I get it now.
Hey, let me check your lease and make sure you're allowed to have a dog there. Oh, wait, click. Yep.
Right.
Gotcha. Okay. But my meth farm has just completely been
That's
right.
sabotaged.
Are we sharing the profits or what's going on here?
Tell me when you guys are dropping by so the 17 extra people that live in the apartment won't be here that day.
Very accurate.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I'm glad. We can move on to Kings now. I'm sorry to disrupt everything. I was just really concerned because I had a neighbor who lives in Land Park area. Shout out Michael Liang who I don't even think he knows what a podcast is, but his tree took out his neighbor's car, and he actually said sorry. She's pissed, obviously, but it's like he and I said, wait, what did you do? All you did was have the tree. Meanwhile, stuff that he was telling me, when there was a power line that caught fire because it came down, and he hears all this popping sound, and this power line is down in her yard and all this stuff. Not that that's her fault, but in the grand scheme of things, that could have burned down. But it's just act of God stuff.
Well, that and whatever. His power got shut off because her power got shut off.
Right.
So yeah, hey, why do you got to do that with the power line? No, that's not how it works. Yeah,
that's rough.
Trees falling seems to be one of the biggest issues right now.
Here's how we can bring it back to Kings, though, is because Chimezie Metu blames the power outage for Harrison Barnes going off for a season-high 30 points. So
that's true. He did. He said, we're going to make sure that Harrison's power stays off. That's dark. That's not very nice. It's not very nice because Harrison Barnes can go to the practice facility and shower and do all that stuff. His wife and baby, they don't have that luxury, so they're sitting at home in the dark a lot of the time. So damn you, Chimezie Metu. That's not the way these things work. Okay, so let's get to it. If you're watching on YouTube and you don't mind, please give us a thumbs up. That helps with some sort of algorithm that is ruining the world. And
how are we doing on our thumbs up? Do we get enough?
Sean, you told people to do it twice. We're not getting enough.
Well,
because that takes away the one.
I think we do. I think we do pretty well. Like 150, 200 thumbs ups, and especially the live shows we do around that. Most shows, I think we're over 100 thumbs up, and that's pretty good.
We might be getting more thumbs up than like Sabonis and Fox get All-Star votes.
Oh, ouch!
See,
hey-o. Okay, so again, if you're watching on YouTube, subscribe. Give us a thumbs up. If you're listening somewhere else, we would love it if you gave us a rating and a review, especially with like Apple. That always helps the algorithm there as well. Thank you for supporting the Kings Beat. We've actually been growing a ton, and it's been a lot of fun. And the pod just keeps getting more and more popular, and we appreciate all the people out there. And you know, it's a labor of love we do here. It's a lot of work that we try to accomplish every week, and we thank you guys for jumping on board with us. We will have an off the record with the Kings Beat virtual happy hour, probably in the third week of the month. Still working on that, so no announcement yet, but there will be one this month for sure. And outside of that, Sacramento Kings started off the homestand a little shaky. 0-2 losses to the Atlanta Hawks and the Los Angeles Lakers. We covered the Hawks loss, I believe, on the last podcast. But the loss to the Lakers, where are you guys at with that? Because that was one of the strangest games I've seen where, you know, not only was the defense was like the worst defense I've ever seen this Kings team play. I mean, they allowed an opponent to shoot 61% from the field, and they didn't even make a three-pointer in the second half. But where are we at with the Lakers loss before we get to some of the positive things this week?
It was gross.
It was gross.
It really disappointed me, to be honest. Like, especially after the Charlotte and Washington losses, like this is a third example of this team seemingly overlooking an opponent, or maybe it's more so that their defense is just lack of defense more so is catching up to them. Like, to give up 136 points to this team when you're talking about 56 of those coming between Thomas Bryant and Dennis Schroeder. Like, obviously LeBron is his own beast, but James mentioned nobody hit a three in that second half, and it seems like they started to overreact. The points in the paint were ridiculous in that game, and that was something that Mike Brown highlighted, and also highlighted in a more positive fashion in their most recent win over, why am I already drawing a blank? Who
None
did
of
they
us
just
remember
play?
who they played yesterday.
Orlando Magic. Yes, thank you. So I just thought that it was pretty disappointing. You know, we've seen moments of positive progress on the defensive end of the floor, but this was just an example of their defense is still bad enough that they can lose on any given night, in my mind, because it is still LeBron James, and I understand you have to acknowledge that, but this Lakers team has not been very good. And I was pretty disappointed by that performance, and happy they were able to bounce back. But the Lakers night was a pretty tough one for me.
Yeah, I think I don't know how to look at that game precisely, because there's a thought there where I think the Kings really are going through it in a way, you know, trying to find themselves. There's a blueprint: beat this team backdoor, beat them up in the paint, mix in some physicality, and you're going to struggle, and really capitalize in the moments where Domantas Sabonis is not on the floor, because that is the door being open, so to speak. And they bust right through it. You know, you don't need to beat this team from the perimeter. You can just really take it inside, get to the free throw line, beat them up, get people in foul trouble, and the backdoor stuff and the everything in the paint. It's like you crack the code right there. And they really struggle with teams with length and physicality. It's not this year's team either. I mean, it's kind of like the way they match up against the Bucks historically. It's like, man, I feel like they'd lose to the Bucks 9 out of 10 times if they were to play them. So, I think I think what happened, though, I think it was a good thing, because even though there's not a lot of practice time, Mike Brown came out and ripped his team, held them accountable, and I think it really started in the game before that with the Hawks, when Malik Monk is talking about how, you know, they can flip a switch after Atlanta goes on this 7-0 run. You go on an 11-2 run, and then you get comfortable. Oh, we're good. And they smacked you right in the mouth and stole that game. And so I think they had a lot of things that they needed to kind of shore up, and I'm not saying that they did it, but nothing like a good old fashioned slump buster to get right. And you get the Orlando Magic in town, and yeah, they're fresh off a win against Golden State, who, by the way, is one of the toughest. I mean, I don't care what this Golden State team looks like with or without Steph Curry. Even without Steph Curry, they've kind of held onto the rope again at home. I mean, they're really, really good at home, and the Orlando Magic went in there and beat them. So with the Magic in town, with the top rookie in that draft, and you got Keegan Murray, kind of coming off maybe his, if not his worst game, one of his worst games. His coach kind of, grilling him about not being able to get a rebound and not showing effort to get a rebound, and defensively this team is a mess. They came out and they took care of business. I keep liking to say that, like it or not, your identity is this fast-paced, efficient scoring team, and that was probably the best they've looked on offense all season. So defensively, though, there was some moments I was questioning myself, wondering, is this some good defense, or is this poor shot selection? Is Orlando just kind of shit in the bed, for lack of a better term? I don't know. I guess that remains to be seen with a team like Houston coming in here on Wednesday and Friday. And they've only got 4 wins on the road this season. So, and they're just 10 wins on the season alone. So, these are these get right games, and hopefully they can build that equity we talk about. I also know, by the way, not to ramble too much, James, how bad was that Lakers game? I knew it was bad because that was the most vocal James has been. I sit right next to him at games, and some of us are just looking over at him. I'm like, dude, do you got money on this game? He was so pissed off.
Yeah. It's really tough. I'm watching what's happening there in the Lakers game, and the worst part is they lose by 3, right? 2 or 3, 136, 134. I think
3,
it's 2.
I believe, right? Oh, 2.
136, 134. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So you talked about breaking the code with the Kings, and I fully agree with that. I mean, the way you beat the Kings is the second that Domantas Sabonis steps off the floor, you eliminate any lead and you build your own, right? So that's what every team in the league seems to be doing. And then if you can figure out a way to get Domantas Sabonis off the floor for more time, which really doesn't seem that difficult, that just means that you bum rush the guards and the forwards who get out of the way and leave Sabonis standing there all alone in the middle of the key ready to pick up a foul. And then he's out of the game. It doesn't seem like it's that hard. Like if you're an opponent to figure out how to beat this team, and so they have to figure out ways to stop that. How to not let Sabonis get stuck on an island. And I don't know what the best way to do that is, because a lot of it isn't just one-on-one play. So when I'm watching this team, I'm not watching just a ton of blow-bys. That's not what I feel like. I don't think Kevin Huerter just gets run by and scored on all day long. And I watch De'Aaron Fox, and people who don't think he's playing defense, that dude's playing defense. There are occasions where he kind of he hedges his bet with somebody and then they can get by him. But I don't think individual defense is an issue with him. If we're talking about where he's at in the upper echelon of NBA point guards, he's not at the top, but he's also nowhere near the bottom. And then I think about that with almost every position on the floor, and it's not that they're playing poor individual defense, it's that they're playing really bad team defense. The communication doesn't seem great. The weak side help is god-awful. It's absolutely atrocious. Every single time you're watching Sabonis all by himself down there, and where is that other help defender coming from the weak side? And then when that happens, someone else rotates to go get that guy if somehow there's a spray 3. But I really feel like they're just not buying in 100% to the concept. Or in Keegan Murray's case, I just don't think he's experienced enough. He doesn't know how to play the defensive scheme that they're trying to do, and he's out there for 30 minutes a night and he's getting clubbed. And then, I think just watching that and trying to figure that whole situation out, this is a bad defensive team. They're not bad for a couple of games. No. They're bad for the last 15 or 20.
Terrible.
Oh yeah, terrible.
Brown called
yeah.
Terrible. Yeah.
Well,
Mike
yeah,
Brown
but
terrible.
They were up around their defensive rating was around 112, and now it's back down to 114.6. Like, they have faded so hard in the last 2-3 weeks. It's horrific. I think their defensive rating for like the last 5 games coming into last night was like 121. It's something like just absolutely ridiculously horrible. And that's a team that's just not paying attention and not doing what they have to do. And even like we talk about like the defensive the defensive rebounding woes, right? This is still like the second or third best defensive rebounding team in the league. You just can't have nights where guys like Keegan just don't get a rebound. And Sean and I were watching. We went back and we looked and see when the last time was Keegan Murray had a rebound, and he had got 1 rebound in the fourth quarter of the Atlanta game. Then he went 4 quarters against the Lakers without a rebound. Then he went almost 2 quarters in the game against Orlando without a rebound. And there were times where Sean, like, we were sitting there looking at each other like, it's like he avoids rebounding.
It's allergic.
I don't know what to say. He's allergic, but there are balls that bounce to him, and he watches, and people run right by him and take them. And I'm always shocked. I don't want to be too harsh on a rookie because he is learning, but at the same time, I can't believe, like, Brenden, is that the first time you've seen a coach call out a player? I know it's the first time we've seen Mike Brown, but even last year, like, specifically call out an individual player and say, you weren't good enough. That's not okay. He basically called him the Coke machine, the Derek Williams.
You got to explain that.
Yeah, that's George Karl during his brief tenure in Sacramento, looked at the box score in postgame and said, even a Coke machine can get more than 1 rebound in 30 minutes of play.
So the modern version is Manny the Mannequin.
Manny the Mannequin, exactly. That is a modern version. Even Manny the Mannequin would have got more than 0 rebounds in 29 minutes of action.
Well, what was crazy, I know you asked Brenden, but like you see Malik Monk just going after the ball. He had 5 or 6 boards, I think, in the first half alone.
Yeah.
And Keegan's running away from it. And that's what I think is really frustrating, especially when you just ISO him and watch how he plays. And I know, if anyone makes he rebounded so well in college. First of all, who gives a shit? Secondly, it's a different system. He's obviously one of the best players on his team. He's, if not the best player on his team at the time. It's so much different. It's not a comparison. It's not even to show that he's capable of doing it. It's maybe he's playing closer to the basket than he does in Sacramento, which is obvious. But he doesn't have a knack to go and get it yet, and that has to be learned.
Well, and look at what Trey Lyles has been doing recently. In the last 10 games, Trey Lyles is second on the team in rebounding, and he's playing less than 17 minutes a night. Domas is obviously first. Last 10 games, 13.4. Second is Trey Lyles with 5.3. You have to go down to 6th to reach Keegan Murray, who's playing more than 12 minutes more than what Lyles is and getting 3.4 boards compared to Keegan's 5, or compared to Lyles' 5.3 in the last 10 games alone. Like, I think that is the first time. I might be forgetting something from Luke or Alvin, but to me, from what I remember, I think that is the first time I've heard it so blatantly called out like that. And it kind of surprised me, to be honest, because I thought that Keegan made a lot of progress defensively in that Lakers game. I thought that he drew at least 1 charge. There might have been another.
2 charges where he took it in the chops against LeBron James.
And Coach has really been emphasizing rotating early and protecting the rim and how important that low man is at protecting the rim. And I think that Keegan has really struggled with that throughout the course of this season, which is to be expected. He's a rookie. I think adjusting to the speed of the game and reacting fast enough is a normal adjustment for a rookie. But I thought that he made a lot of progress in that game. So it really surprised me for Coach to come out and call him out in the way that he did. But honestly, I didn't even realize that he didn't grab a single board. Maybe that's just me overlooking the box score, and I should have recognized. It's something that Coach had talked about previously of Keegan. If somebody asked me, what do you do good outside of shooting? What should my answer be? And it was kind of unsure. And I think that we're still somewhat at that point, but it did surprise me a bit, considering that I thought that Keegan had such a improved defensive game in that Lakers showing, even if the team overall was pretty underwhelming in that aspect.
I thought that if they would have won that game, that there was a possibility for Keegan to be the defensive player of the game. Brenden clearly has got to run to his front door, which is okay because let's be honest, there are a lot of weird things happening right now in the world, and so people show up at your front door all the time. But
got a glare in my eye.
Oh, got it.
I saw that.
I was like, as far as like when it came to him calling out Keegan, I thought Mike Brown did himself a disservice because, sure, call out a player, that's fine. Do not make excuses for Harrison Barnes having 2 rebounds. Like his point with Harrison Barnes was Harrison Barnes had to go defend LeBron James on the perimeter a bunch. Hey, LeBron James took 28 shots. 6 of those came from 3. 22 of them came inside. So, no, Harrison Barnes was at fault as well. And, oh, by the way, your point guard, who happens to be your second or third leading rebounder on the team, also had 1 rebound. So, like, at what point do you... that's where I was kind of surprised by Mike Brown, because I get calling out a rookie, but, you know, that rookie also did some nice things. He also had, like, 15 or 16 points. And is he getting it? I don't know. Like, overall, there are some questions about, you know, what his ceiling is still. But, like, I don't know. To me, it was weird to roast a young player in a 3-point loss against, you know, a team where 4 guys scored 20 points or more. And one of those is LeBron James. But, you know, I just didn't know that it warranted it.
Well, were any of us sitting there thinking that rebounding was the issue, even?
A little bit. I will admit it had crossed my mind, but I think it was more so, it wasn't a singular game focus. And I think with respect to James, I think James' question set him up for failure, because James said, "Oh, you know, Keegan was incredible tonight." Kind of, I'm paraphrasing, but he's almost setting Keegan up for this great praise to come from the head coach, and the head coach took not only that game, but a group of games in which he just has not done what is expected of him. And Mike used that moment to be like, no, hold on. We're looking at this all wrong. Like, even though he's drawn some nice things like the offensive fouls against somebody like LeBron James, and may have he still continues to hit shots. It's like there's a bigger expectation of Keegan Murray, especially as a rookie, and things that they're working on. And I think he'd use that opportunity to kind of hammer him down. So just blame, it's James' fault.
I had asked Sabonis about Keegan. I didn't ask Mike. He lit into... I'm almost sure it was unprovoked.
Oh, we got to go to the tape.
We might have to go to the tape on that one.
No, because I do remember, maybe it wasn't you, but somebody did ask Mike Brown about that, and that's when he went into the rebounding part of Keegan. I remember it was like almost like a retort, if you will, like a tit for tat, and it was it made my eyes go a little wide, because he didn't want to really acknowledge the... He's like, oh, that's all well and good. It's kind of like with Orlando last night, right? You look at this game against the Magic, and you're like, all right, well, you've got a season high performance against for Harrison Barnes. You've got a franchise record in threes. You tie your season high in assists. Chimezie Metu plays awesome, and all he's cared about is the 42 fucking points in the paint, and that's incredible, because it's been so much of a problem over this span of the greater part of a month, really. And so that's really what Mike Brown, when he focuses, especially being a defensive coach, that's where his attention lies.
Actually, I'm gonna we'll make this segment the business of basketball, which Sean loves.
I love it. No overreactions yet.
Yeah, but. Like,
maybe the Keegan Murray thing is the overreaction.
I get the Tuesday overreaction being the Keegan Murray thing, but no, I think the bigger problem here is Mike Brown is fighting so hard to have his imprint on this team. Is he losing? Because the imprint, the like who this team is, this is a running gun, play no defense, have a good time, score 130 points per game. And Mike Brown is clinging to his principles and like tooth and nail, like fighting and saying, no. I don't care that we had 39 assists. I don't care that we had 23 made field goals. I don't care. None of that matters. The reason we won this game was 42. It was 42 points in the paint by our opponent. And I get what he's saying, but his defensive principles and this roster, this makeup, that's something else I asked him. Can you teach this roster defense? Like, is that possible? Like, have we seen, like, they have regressed so hard that you have to wonder, like, can this group actually play defense? They can do it for short spurts, and that was his point was, well, they've been able to do it. So I guess the Tuesday overreaction is, like, will Mike Brown be able to, like, win this battle between his players and himself, which I don't think is something that they're outwardly saying to each other. but it's the way it plays out on the court.
I think that we've seen the offense be successful, and credit to Mike Brown for that. Like 134 in that Lakers game, it still was a good offensive performance. Their defense just let them down, and then they dropped 136 in that game against Orlando. So the offense has been there, but obviously you think of Mike Brown as like a defensive coach, and they're sitting at 24th right now. And to James's point, like there was a stretch where they looked competent. They looked like a league average defense. And I think that's all we're really asking when you're talking about a team that's ranked 4th in offensive rating. But I think that Mike Brown is going to continue to kind of focus in on that point, because I think he's right when he talks about like when we get to playoff basketball, that matters. That is what is going to be the difference here. And I can't help but have some sort of flashbacks to Luke Walton deciding that like, hey, maybe we're going to slow down the pace a little because we have to have a good half court offense. And it's a different aspect, but it's like we have to clean this up because that's what's important for the postseason or for the games that matter. And I think it's different, but I think the offense is still there. So credit to Mike Brown, because it's not like he's focusing so much on the defense that the offense is struggling because of it. But I think that he does need to continue to push these guys to be as good as they can on the defensive end. I thought when you asked him that question, it was kind of interesting. Like, I don't know that he's ever going to sit up there and be like, I don't think these guys can play defense. But to his point, they have done it for stretches. There was a little while where I was feeling a little optimistic, and I feel like I'm back down to earth a little bit now after Charlotte, Washington, LA on the defensive end. But I think that Mike Brown is going to try to continue to get this team to do as much as they can on the defensive end, as he absolutely should. But that isn't coming as a result of the offense struggling because of that or anything like that. So I'm kind of fine with the balance and understand very much so why he's saying that games are win, won or loss on the defensive end of the floor for this team, because they're good enough offensively to win any game, but they're bad enough defensively to lose any game at the same time.
Well, and I think that's the part to unpack, because look, it's what James is essentially asking is a question of Mike Brown, which would be, at what point are who you are, especially as you near the midpoint of the season. And I think his reply to that would be, they can be who they are, but it's my job to make them better than what they are, because that's not who I am. And I know that's kind of all over the place there, but
no, that makes sense.
And to the point of like, he's a defensive coach. He's not expecting them to be a top 10 defensive team. I think that he may look at that and say, hey, that's something we can evolve to over my time in Sacramento. It's certainly not going to be this year. But because of how potent they are on the offensive end and how efficient they are on the offensive end, the smallest amount of defensive improvement will go a long, long way with this team. And I think that's where what he has to harp on. So he has to accentuate the positives and really double down on those defensive principles. But I will say too, like, it's so funny. Like we're about 30 minutes into this podcast now, and if anyone's listening, these guys are really fucking. They're really critical for a team who's 5th in the West and who's 5-5 over the last 10 and 3 games over 500. And this is probably about. It's certainly more than what I had expected. I expected them to hover around 500, but they're kind of exceeding expectations. And I say that because you're moving into this midpoint of the season, and people like to put grades up there and really kind of take a true evaluation of where teams are. And this is a team that has exceeded, I think, most expectations throughout, not only nationally, because of course they do. National doesn't expect much from Sacramento, but even our own as well here in the local level. But I will say this, like, what I credit Mike Brown so much from doing is he knows that playoffs are not, when you just look at the league right now, there's so much parity. There's a lot of injuries. There's blowouts every single night. There's lopsided scores. There's super high scoring. And I think what he's trying to really emphasize here is once the season starts to tighten up those straps and get closer to the playoffs, and if you're trying to sustain success, that ain't it, because you may be 5th now and you may have this be where you are and really stem from playing 500 basketball, but really taking advantage of a 7-game win streak where, of course, defense is going to improve in a 7-game win streak because you've won 7 games. But the fact is, to be able to sustain the success in March, April, as you head into a playoff possible run or even a play-in appearance, you won't be able to sustain that playing that way. So he has to see that team rise from among the worst in the league and try to hold at 20 to 15 anywhere in defensive rating, because that's going to be where they'll win games and be able to sustain success, because you already know what you can get on the offensive end.
Yeah, I think he's being realistic. He knows that the Clippers, who have lost 5 games in a row, that come the last 20 games of the season, they'll be cranking up for the playoffs, and they'll just skip right over you in the standings. Or, heaven forbid, you end up at the 7 spot, and you look at who's the 8, 9, and 10. It's kind of what if it's the Clippers and the Warriors and the Lakers, all three? Right. You're not making the playoffs. You're not. They're going to absolutely stomp you, and that's what I think Mike Brown's just being cognizant of. Like, look, if this is who we want to be, we have to start doing it now, and we have to start showing improvement, not showing regression. And that's what, like, realistically, the regression is it's horrific. Like, how bad they've gotten in the last, I don't know, 20 games. It's one of those turns where you're like, okay, this isn't sustainable at all. They would need an offensive rating of like 125 to stay above 500 from here on out, and they have to make changes. And so I think it's a legitimate question. Can you do it with this group of players? And I think the backup center position has been like a red herring. It's been something that's just out there that it's distracting everybody from the fact that isn't the only position that's playing very poorly. And when you don't have that position solidified, it's making all of the other positions like play wonky and not figure out things. And I don't know how Mike Brown has to like get through this minefield here, but he needs better players at the back end of his rotation. That's it. Like, that sounds harsh, but like, this team has at a certain point, it has to go out and find 1 or 2 more upgrades in the top 8 or 9 man of the rotation. Like, they can't expect this team to hold on and just show improvement on the court and be okay by the end of the season. That's typically not the way it works.
There's like 7 players right now that I feel comfortable with, and the 8th kind of fluctuates. I think Trey Lyles has been good recently. But last thing I'll say on the defensive thing, like, I don't even know that I'd call it regression. To me, like, there's an outlier portion of the season where they played good defense, because the beginning of the year, they were not good. There was maybe a 10 or so game sample where they were solid, maybe around 17th. And then since then, they've just been bad again. So to me, it's like there's been a slight moment where they were good, but outside of that, this team has been bad on defense. That's what we've seen for years prior. And apparently what's still happening.
Yeah, it's not good. Okay, so let's touch base on this because it kind of plays into this. The defensive player of the game in against the Orlando Magic was, of course, Chimezie Metu. Chimezie Metu played 4 minutes and 20 seconds over the previous 10 games, including 8 DNP CDs. I thought Mezzi looked great, and that takes a lot for me to say that all the time, because there are certain things that Chimezie does that, like, I see why he gets benched. But there were also moments in that game where you saw the switchability that he brings and how much that does actually impact that second unit. His ability to just go from one player to the next without, getting isolated and getting beat up, which is, something that's happened to Rashawn Holmes, is something that happens to anyone else that plays that position. So what were your guys' thoughts on Chimezie? I know we talked to him in the locker room as well. And I don't know if you can humble Chimezie Metu, because that's not who he is. He's a very confident young man, but maybe the way this season has played out has changed his perspective a little bit.
No, for sure. I mean, he talked about the conversation with Mike Brown, even in an abstract way. He didn't want to go down in much detail, while Mike Brown actually did and talked about the things he was challenging for. But then Mezzi held himself to the ultimate accountability by saying, I got too comfortable. Imagine that. Like, the experience he had in San Antonio, coming over here in Sacramento, knowing a system like Mike Brown and having a international FIBA basketball type style translate to an NBA game, and then how to survive and make a living in that, and knowing how athletic he is and how quick he is and how familiar he is with all of that, to me was the eye opener. And look, I thought the benching of him went far too long. I think what Mike really wanted to do was to take advantage of Rashawn Holmes and see if there was something there and see if if there was any type of spark, and there just isn't. There just hasn't been. And I think it's unfortunate for Rashawn because even if he's coming in and playing anywhere from 6 to 11 minutes, it's not really enough for him to really get comfortable on the floor. It's kind of like one of those, not to compare him to a clunker of a car, because that's not what I'm trying to do, but one of those engines that just doesn't go 0 to 60 very quickly, and 60 representing the comfortability and feel for the game. Sometimes Rashawn can go out there in spurts and have it, but when you're talking about only being able to go out there and be impactful in a 3-minute stretch is very, very difficult, I think, for someone like him. Whereas with Mezie, it just comes naturally, and especially with how quick he is to make reads, and as James said, the switchability. Plus, everything's at the rim with the guy, even offensively and defensively. Like, he tries to meet people there. He's not the biggest guy, but he still tries to play the shot, the rim protector type role, even though he's not really that type of player. So I just think he's a guy who, if he's telling himself that he fell into a comfort level and that was to be slapped on the wrist for, I think the punishment may have gone a little bit too long, because I still think he's the most impactful player they have of those backups. And last night was really great to see. I know it's a small sample size, it's one game, but he was eager to get out there. He was impactful right away. He maximized his opportunities. Doesn't matter what he does on the offensive end, and that's one of the things where I think people will, much like that Neemias Queta game where they say, "Oh, look at all these dunks he had," and it's like, that ain't it. Like, that's not where he needs to be impactful. It's the other areas, and he recognized that. He didn't get into foul trouble, and he matched a team with length. And I think, unlike the game where KZ Okpala a few nights ago was the defensive player of the game, I think that was in Utah, and then comes out the next night against the Hawks and doesn't play at all. I think we're going to see Mezie as the guy here going forward for a prolonged stretch, as long as he doesn't get too comfortable or just wane in those areas.
I think Mezie's clearly been the best backup center on this team. I think he still obviously has his shortcomings. I think when it comes to the defensive end of the floor, that he had a solid night against the Magic. They highlighted his 6 defensive rebounds, and I think Jordy mentioned 2 verticalities in that video the Kings put out of him awarding Mezie the defensive player of the game chain. But I think that Mezie's biggest strength is still the offensive end. I think the vertical spacing that he provides, and just having versatility, like Mike Brown pointed out, that at Mezie's size and speed, if he's playing the 5, that he should be able to outrun everybody. And I think that that's important on the offensive end, but also being able to get back defensively, and just seeing that progress is important. Mike Brown mentioned when he got asked, like, why did Mezie get sat in the first place, that he brought up effort. And I thought that was kind of interesting, and highlighted how it's only 6 to 8 minutes a half that he's asking a backup center to play. And if you're only playing that much, effort can never really be a question. So I think that rewarding Mezie for this solid play that he had, when he's clearly been the best option at this role that they are searching for so clearly, if you're able to kind of solidify that and feel okay, which Mezie seems far and away to be the best option right now, that we can focus on some of the other shortcomings that this team has, and maybe stop worrying about backup centers so much. I'm not ready to say that yet with Mezie, but keep him in there for a little while, and he just clearly seems like the best option so far.
Yeah, it's interesting. Mezie got up to a point. He had a 3-game stretch where he had 8 points and 8 rebounds in 17 minutes, and then he had 10 points and 8 rebounds in 15 minutes, and then he had 10 points and 3 rebounds in 12 minutes. And then from then on, he just completely fell apart. Over the next 3 games, 5 points, 6 points. His rebound numbers are low, 0 points, 5 points. And he played himself, like, I understand why he was out of the rotation, like, fully. Like, he had 20 games to make his mark. And I thought he had been building up to something and then lost his way a little bit. And I think that, like, he has potential for sure. But again, like, I don't think he's the backup center option for the rest of the season. I think the Kings will try other things. I also think that they wanted to make sure that everyone in the league knew that Rashawn Holmes could still run up and down the court, that there was nothing wrong with him.
I don't think they did themselves any favors.
Well, maybe not, but
Then it got worse, right?
I don't know if it got worse. I think he's still healthy, and I think most people understand that this just isn't a pick and roll offense, and he's a pick and
Right.
roll player.
Right.
And so, like, you can go find a team that does a bunch of pick and rolls, and he can go right back to being a very effective player. I think the biggest thing for me is that when Chimezie puts pressure on the rim, kind of like what Sean was saying, when he puts pressure on the rim, it really is impactful. Like, he's one of the few guys that can really go up and above everybody, and he gives Malik Monk just that person, that running mate to play with, which, like, that's what's been missing. Malik Monk has been in a funk, and a lot of times it's because he loves to pick and roll and he loves to have a big man that he lobs the ball up to. You take that away from him, and all of a sudden he started looking normal, like regular, and maybe not even great for 2-3 weeks that we were dealing with the Malik Monk sort of dip in the schedule. Yeah, I think it's interesting. We're going to keep revisiting this. I don't think the Kings still know that they need more at that position, at the 4, at the 5, and I expect them to be like pretty aggressive at those two spots come the trade deadline. But who knows if they actually do pull off any trades? I just know that they're going to try to be aggressive. Let's get to the crappy news of the week, so we don't tuck it in at the end of the show. But I think we all spent enough time with Chima Moneke. Sean spent time with him in the past. Brennan spent time in Stockton. I've sat down with Chima a couple of times, and just even in pregame, just chatting. Such an engaging young man, and fun, really, really bright. A guy who has lived all over the world because his parents were diplomats. Who just brings this like charisma and everything else. And the Kings decided to waive him before the deadline. All of us, we didn't think that would happen. And I know someone even called us liars on one platform or another. And I'm like, no, we were projecting.
Really?
We were predicting what might happen. Because we missed that the Kings waived Chima Moneke, that doesn't really mean anything. We're talking about literally the 15th man on the roster, and all of us knew that they liked him, but clearly they liked their roster flexibility more, which was harsh, especially even the way it happened. Chima, from what I know, was on his way to a game in Stockton, and they called him and called him off. Just not good. And so, first of all, lots of love for Chima because he was a fun personality to have around. And he'll land on his feet. He's a good guy. I think that like he's a player that probably has to go through the G League to get to the league. But like, what are you guys' thoughts on this situation to open up the roster spot?
Yeah, I mean, you hit it right there. I think he's appreciative of the opportunity as anyone is in the NBA. They did him a favor by, I mean, he earned it for one, but they also did him a favor in the sense that making a roster spot, but spending the majority of the time of your learning it with the G League level and trying to get better and trying to improve. And it's not that it didn't really work out. It's that this team is positioned to utilize a roster spot that hopefully that they can improve the regular rotation. And Chima in their eyes just isn't there yet. And when you look at somebody, they obviously signed a 10-day contract to PJ Dozier. Whether that works out or doesn't, like PJ Dozier is a guy that was highly thought of at one point as a rotational player with Denver before an injury, and he's kind of working his way out a little bit longer in the tooth, 26 years old, and low risk, high reward situation. Could something like that work out, especially with somebody who is able to do it on the defensive end as well and add some wing depth? So,
And familiarity with Jordy Fernandez. He spent 3 years with
yeah.
Jordy in Denver. Go ahead.
Yeah, great point. And it's, and those are the type of situations that it comes to. And when you talk about Matthew Dellavedova versus Chima Moneke versus KZ Okpala, well, those guys you can obviously have seen have KZ has been a rotational player at moments during the season, and it's kind of looking like more of a rotational player now than what was earlier in the season. And Delly is just an extension of the head coach on the bench, and they clearly value that leadership, expertise, familiarity more than what they have with Chima at the moment, who's in the G League. And if things shape out, there's possibility of something down the line in the future. Again, possibility. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but hopefully he's opened some eyes with other teams. It's kind of similar to the Gabe Vincent situation. He was in your system and goes off to Miami and flourishes and becomes a starter at points of the season. So, and made a nice career for himself. So, hopefully that can happen for Chima, and if not, he can go overseas. But I do agree that his pathway to the NBA will continue to be the G League this season. We'll see what it looks like toward the end of the season and into summer league as well, or into the summer as well.
Yeah, Brenden, I want to clarify something that Sean just said. The Kings cannot sign him to a two-way contract, and they cannot sign him to a G League contract, right? Because he already made more than the $50,000 for this season. For this season. Yeah. Now, what happens going forward, I'm not sure, but they cannot do any of that this season in particular.
Yeah, and hopefully Chima gets another opportunity. I mean, just to echo what you guys said, like, he was one of my favorite people to interact with, just his personality. I thought that he was just so humble. But from the other aspect, like, I understand there's an adjustment period to getting used to overseas basketball to NBA. I think the whole 3-second rule was a big thing for him, because coach always pointed out, like, him and KZ kind of being in the same area when it came to their expected impact, being those lengthy, versatile defenders. And Chima was a very good rebounder in the G League. He was a solid finisher. I think he was upwards of 50%, even though he preferred to be around the 60-70 mark when it came to 2-point percentage. But I think that being 27, and when you look at this Sacramento team, like we mentioned before, there's 7 guys that you feel comfortable with, and you'd love to have more than that. And I think there's question marks around the league of if you can try out some other spots that maybe you could get that guy to be your 7th or 8th guy that you feel comfortable with, like PJ Dozier that they're trying out right now, to your guys' point, was a rotational guy in Denver before he had this ACL injury. So if he became what he was before, I think that could be a valuable piece. So I understand it from Sacramento's point of view. Definitely sad to see the personality and potential of Chima Moneke walk out the door, but I am intrigued by what they're going to kind of do with this. And I like that we got the answer pretty quickly, just for the sake of my own curiosity, that they're going to try out a couple 10 days. Maybe they stick with PJ after this, but, or maybe it's so they can take on 2 people in a trade while they give up 1, or whatever uneven amount in some sort of deal. But just to give them a little bit more flexibility. I understand where they're coming from, because to be honest, as much as I like Chima as a person and saw the potential, like he wasn't giving them much right now, and was using one of their very few 15 roster spots that they have available.
Yeah. So when it comes to Chima, like, or when it comes to that roster spot, like PJ Dozier, they signed him on Monday with this very specific idea in mind. It's that they had 5 games in 10 days, and so they can actually, they're going to have plenty of practice time at home. They're going to get a good look at him. Mike Brown said he wants to see his compete level. Like, what kind of physicality does he have? I don't know that he's going to stick around after 1 10-day, but the Kings had basically 30 days to test drive that position. So the trade deadline is February 9th. They can continuously make moves here with that roster spot. And then if they need to make a trade, even if they sign a guy to a 10-day contract, they can waive that player off the 10-day contract if they need to as part of a trade. And I'll also say this. I think we were slightly surprised, all of us, that I don't think we were surprised that they made a cut. I think we were slightly surprised that it was Chima. I think I expected them likely to make a cut, and I just didn't know who it would be. Like, I didn't think it would be KZ. Chima was in the back of my mind, but Dellavedova was more in the front of my mind. And, like, those guys are on the roster still, but there's no guarantee that they'll be on the roster by the end of the season. And it's just the Kings are willing to pay the money to keep them around right now. I asked Mike Brown why KZ and Delly and not Chima. And, what you guys said was right. Chima's a little too far away from what they're trying to accomplish. And the other 2, KZ brings a ton on the defensive end, and he's only 23 years old. And Dellavedova is a spectacular locker room guy who fills a big time need, like as a third point guard in case of an emergency, which the Kings have had to use like 3 times this season already. And with De'Aaron Fox's wife being pregnant, there's a possibility that he may miss a little bit more time. And so you can kind of project out that they will probably need a backup point guard at some point this season. And Dellavedova, he's a guy that can handle the job for short stints. And so at the end of the day, I was kind of caught off guard by it being Chima, but then again, like I understand where they're going with it. And it's just that, like, look, we can probably replace what Chima is doing at the G League level with some other way, and he's not going to make an impact up here right now. So let's see if we can find someone that can at least help out, or at least have the roster flexibility to do something at the deadline. Either way, kind of a bummer for a young guy to see that happen. What else do we got?
Factor cap.
Factor cap. Oh,
the return. Is
that the return? It's been a little while. I gotta be more consistent with this, but I got one. A couple.
Oh wow. Let's
do it. Let's hit one last topic and then factor cap. Does that make sense?
Oh. Let's do it.
No, I'm kidding.
Harrison Barnes, over his last 20 games, 16.2 points, 4.8 rebounds, shooting 48.6% from the field, 37% from the 3-point line. He's all the way up to almost 34%. Brenden,
take a lap.
I can't believe some people called him washed. I don't know what people were thinking. Like other podcasts, I heard people saying it. It's crazy. I was never on board this at all. It's so obvious that he was going to be good. He's a great play finisher, and they don't need creators. They have their creators with Fox and Domas, and HB can be there and just finish plays. I thought that he was aggressive in taking triples early in that Orlando game, and throughout the course of the season, I think that we've seen him have a little bit more of a quick trigger when that's something that I've wanted to see more in years prior. The just intelligence that he has playing, that obviously he has that threat of being a good shooter, but back cutting when they're overplaying him, and Domas being able to reward that. He's been great, and I can't believe anybody would have ever called him potentially washed.
Unacceptable. Sean, anything else to add?
No, I mean, he said it. I'm just glad that all that made sense. I mean, like, there's certain things you can get on him about, and he was so efficient. He was 8 of 8 at one point last night. Defensively, he does what he does. At times, we've seen it look really bad. I think it's. I think the way that they've had him. I mean, obviously he's playing an important role, and Mike Brown harps on that a lot. So they have such an effort of getting early points for Harrison Barnes, for him to see the ball go through the hoop, and almost as like a mechanism for him to stay engaged on the offensive end. And I love it when he takes 10, 11, 12 shots a game. I mean, that has to be there for their offense. And with the way their offense is sizzling, they should be able to do that. That's something I would do, should, in a capital SHOULD, because that's where their bread is buttered on the offensive end, and to have him engaged and as part of that, it needs to be there. It usually translates to success for this team. So, yeah, kudos for him. I'm glad he had a season-high performance, and I'm glad we got to talk to him.
Yeah, we got to talk to him. A rarity. Yeah, and I'll say, too, like, just Harrison Barnes continues to be a guy who brings something this team lacks. And each and every night it feels like it's something different, but it's very rare that you find a player that has that knack, that can sense what it is that his team needs, whether he needs to get to the free throw line, or whether he needs to have a big rebounding night, or whether he needs to hit some big-time threes. He's always been that guy for this team over the last couple of years, and it's good to see him kind of round back into shape and find his place with this team. And we talked about this at the beginning of the season. We had a discussion on who is going to be the Kings' third leading scorer on the season, and right now he just re-entered the race. He's right there with Malik Monk and with Kevin Huerter, and I think he's at 14.5 points. Monk's at like 14.2, and Herter's like 15.8. This team has a lot of scorers, and they got a bunch of guys that can go for 30 on any given night, and that makes you dangerous. So I like to see him back in the flow, and we need to give him his props when he is playing well, and he's been playing very well the last couple of weeks. All right, Brenden, let's hit it. Factor cap.
All right, first one we're going to start with. I think we've passed 2 of the triple voting days for All-Star voting, and we're getting closer and closer to that, Sean. Fact or cap, Domantas Sabonis will make an All-Star team. The All-Star team this year. And I'll go through some of the front court competition that he has in the Western Conference. There are 4 backcourt players and 6 front court players that make it, and then 2 wild cards. But to go through some of the front court competition that Domas has, Nikola Jokic, LeBron James, and Zion Williamson, to me, are the 3 that are making it for sure. After that,
before you continue, of those 3, how many of them are making it on votes?
I can check 2. What the recent voting is. At least Jokic and LeBron, right?
Mm-hmm. I think it's Jokic, LeBron, and AD are the top 3. Maybe I'm wrong.
And I don't even need you to finish because I'm saying fact. I think the coaches will reward him for his play.
I'll go through the rest of these names really quick. Lauri Markkanen, Domantas Sabonis, Anthony Davis, Paul George, Jeremy Grant, Aaron Gordon. If you want to throw the Minnesota guys in there, Rudy Gobert, Karl Anthony Towns, Andrew Wiggins, Kawhi Leonard. 6 guys at very least make it from this list, potentially up to 8, depending on what those wild cards look like. Fact or cap, James Ham, Domantas Sabonis will make the All-Star team this year.
Fact. I think you named 3 guys that I think you're going to have problems because AD is probably going to get voted in. So AD, Jokic, and LeBron will all 3 probably get voted in. Zion will make it for his play. That's 4. Sabonis will be there, I'm almost assured. And after that, it's going to be a toss-up. I think Paul George. And then I'll throw out the Markkanen could make it because it's in Utah. That's going to be a bit of an issue.
It's in Utah. They're going to want someone from the home city. I think he makes it, and I think the one that possibly doesn't is Zion, especially with the injury. And if the only way I think Zion gets in, and I could be completely on glue here, but I think if Zion gets in because of votes, then he's in, obviously. But I don't know that coaches are going to reward that for more injuries to Zion Williamson.
Is he down again?
Yeah, I'll double check that, but I thought he went out again for an injury just the other day.
Right hamstring, reevaluated in 3 weeks. That's as of the 3rd.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So no, that's a good point, Sean.
You had me doubting there. So yeah, if he doesn't make it through votes, I don't think that the coaches will. Again, you're talking injury. He's been fantastic. Don't get me wrong, and you kind of want to reward the Pelicans for something there. But again, I think, Utah will get a guy. Markkanen has played incredible. It's like the Shai Gilgeous-Alexander thing. I mean, he's played incredible. How do you keep him off? I think if you're picking 6, I think he's got to be a part of it.
And Paul as George, of the
maybe
last...
maybe reward Zion over Paul George. Maybe that's the way to do it, but I don't know.
As of the last fan voting, it was LeBron, Jokic, and AD, and Zion was 4th, about 140K votes behind AD.
Okay. And Paul George is having a good season. He's not having as good a season as Lauri Markkanen. And he's only played 30 games of the 40. So, I mean, yeah, he's still in the running for sure. But to me, Sabonis is a bona fide all-star. He's the second best big man, the second best center in the Western Conference, the third best center in the league. And I don't even know if there's debate on that at all.
Right.
Agreed. I think he absolutely should be there. I think there's also a narrative aspect here of just the Sacramento Kings having turned their trajectory around. We'll see where they end up in this Western Conference because 5th sounds great right now, but they're 2 games out of being 10th. It's so close in the middle of this Western Conference, so we'll see. But to me, I'm at the point where I'm definitely going fact. I'd be surprised if Domas was not in this All-Star game.
And by the way, I even said Lauri Markkanen, if you remember. I said because Utah is going to want a hometown guy. Again, trade deadlines before the All-Star break. So that means I expect him to stay in Salt Lake City.
So you think that coaches vote based on it's the hometown, we should get one of the hometown guys in there?
If he's that good.
No,
yeah.
but it makes a lot of sense. I mean, it makes a lot of sense. The league's going to want to. I mean, the league will,
right.
You're going to want something. You're going to want something there. It's always good to have that type of presence in he's put up incredible numbers, man. Like
he has.
And it's on a team that most people thought were going to be irrelevant. So
they might be irrelevant by the All-Star break.
Could be.
I mean,
could be.
We don't know. But Sean's point. Well, your question, to answer your question, Brenden. Like if this was in San Antonio, you're not giving like Devin Vassell, even though he's averaging like it does. He's probably like the 15th best player at his position. Where Markkanen has had a really, really, really good season, and you would reward partially because he's had a great season, partially because it's in Utah.
Absolutely. Yeah, makes sense. He's had an all-star caliber season, so just the kind of cherry on top there. Makes sense. To me, it's a fact. I think Jokic, LeBron, and Zion are there, possibly AD, and then it comes down to Domas, Paul George, and Lauri Markkanen, and I think we could see all of those guys make it, with one of them being the wild card reserve. Second one I got for you guys. The Kings are currently sitting at atop the Pacific Division, a game and a half ahead of the Clippers and Warriors, 2 games ahead of the Suns, and 3 games ahead of the Lakers. So factor cap, the Sacramento Kings will finish the season top 2 in the Pacific Division.
Yeah.
I love the groans.
I don't know.
I'm gonna say cap. Like they got a lot of work.
By the way,
to do.
I didn't say yeah as in I was giving it yes. That's fact. I was saying yeah like I was trying to noodle it through, and I still haven't gotten there yet.
I say cap. Like they're gonna be in it, but man, like the Warriors won the championship last year. The Clippers are like so deep. If they figured out, like they're in a downturn right now, but like I really have a tough time seeing the Kings surviving and being above those 2 teams. And then that's not even talking about what the Suns, and like I don't think they'll finish 5th, but like they're gonna have a tough time finish top 2.
Agreed. They will. That is cap.
Wow, I am the same. I think the Warriors and one of the Suns or Clippers will probably be above the Kings. But do we all think like it's possible that they're in that top 2, right?
Let's just put it this way: if you had asked me that question before the season started, I'd be like, Brenden, what do you want? What do you think?
Yeah.
So the fact that I even had to think about it and noodle it through was surprising enough. So yeah, no, it's surprising.
Yeah, they can be there. I mean, there's nothing to say they can't, but I mean, their home record needs to be better than it is right now. And that's tough because, I mean, they're floating at 500 on the road, which is incredible. And the fact that, I mean, that they could potentially win 20 games on the road, that's spectacular.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I keep wanting them to win more on the road because of the way they play, but it's like I want to eat a little bit of crow because I don't know if it was the last podcast or the one before that, is like you look at the top teams in the West and nobody has a better record than 500 on the road. I mean, that's including Denver and Memphis. So, that's huge. It really is. And part of me that wants to see a winning record on the road is, again, it has to do with the way they play because so many teams can take a team for granted. They can just really, I mean, playing fast and having an efficient offense like that, with respect to what Mike Brown is saying about sustaining success, he's right. But it's also a way for you to actually win games, especially when your opponent comes in on second nights of back-to-backs or playing 3 and 4 nights. And if that's just part of your DNA and what you are, you will win games that you probably shouldn't. And, I feel like the way they play should be able to bode well for them on the road. And sometimes they get a little bit too comfortable at home.
Okay, so Nuggets, Grizzlies are both 10 and 10 on the road, and they're number 1 and number 2 in the West. The Kings are the only other team that's 500 in the Western Conference on the road at 9 and 9.
9 and 9.
But the fact that they're 12 and 9 at home, where Denver's 17 and 3, Memphis 17 and 3, Warriors are 17 and 4, that's a problem, especially with the crowds.
And Mr. Curry is coming back tonight as we record this on Tuesday.
Yeah. Okay, what do you got for us, Brenden?
Last one, as we look forward to these next 5 games, we've been talking about this 7-game stretch for a long time, and they've dropped one of the first 2. But through these next 5 games, which they have Houston at home on Wednesday, Houston at home on Friday, then they go on the road on Sunday in San Antonio, Second of that road trip, quick road trip, is against the Lakers in LA on Wednesday. Come back and play OKC on Friday. The Kings will win 4 of these next 5 games. Fact or cap?
I will say cap because they've shown me nothing to think that they can sustain more than 2 wins in a row. I mean, let's be honest.
7-game win streak?
No. I'm saying of late. Like if you take since they've returned from that road trip, there's just been nothing lately that shows me that they're anything but Jekyll and Hyde. And you really don't see these it's like win 1, lose 1, win 1, lose 2. Like it's things like that. So I'm gonna say I don't think they can turn it around that quickly, but I do feel like, hey, 3 of the 5, do that. Like that should be your goals, 3 of the 5.
I'm going to say fact, Brenden.
You rose-colored purple Kool-Aid drinking MF.
I think that they will, in fact, do that. I think that they can win 4 out of 5. Especially with 2 games against Rockets.
Yeah, of course they can. No, he said, will they?
They will.
Should they?
They will. No, I do. I believe they will. Houston is absolutely horrible.
They're trash.
Horrible on the road. Well, in general, but on the road, they're even worse. They've got, 4 wins on the season?
4 wins, yeah.
San Antonio has not proven to be a good team at all, but they play hard.
What happens a lot of times at home, what happens when you're playing a team twice like that back-to-back, I know, I'm with you, but a lot of those games that they are expected to take care of business, they don't.
I agree, but I'm also going to say that if they win against Houston tomorrow, right? If they win again, that puts them at 4 games over 500 for the 8th time this season. If they win on Friday, I think that is a moment where they break through a little bit. They break through the ceiling that they've been fighting against, and they might get, they might be able to get 6-7 games over.
I think that it's possible.
Of course
I think
it's
that
possible. That
whatever,
wasn't the
Sean.
Question.
Whatever, Sean. I was getting to it.
Hey,
I am going with cap. I am going with cap.
Screw you, Sean.
I think that they should win 4, but I think I lean more on Sean's side between what both of you guys presented. That like I've lost a little bit of faith in these last couple weeks. I've mentioned it a couple times, but that Charlotte game, the Washington game, the most recent Lakers game, those were all really disappointing to me. And I think that the fact that it's the same issue in all of these games of clear defensive shortcomings, and something else we mentioned earlier, that to me, like they have an outlier portion of the season where they were good defensively. But to me, that's just still the outlier right now. This is a bad defensive team until proven otherwise in my mind. And that makes me think that like any given night, if somebody asks me, do I think the Kings are going to win on that night? I never know what to say. Like, I think they're bad enough defensively to lose against any team. They're good enough offensively to win against any team. So it's hard to predict 4 of 5. I think they can and they should. But if I have to guess, I think I'm going cap and guessing 3 of 5. But obviously hoping for 4.
Which would be just fine.
And they could win all of them. Like, I don't think that's unreasonable.
Of course they could win all of them.
Whatever, Sean.
But
your definition.
But if they went 3 and 5, any fan should be thrilled with that.
Thrilled?
Yeah.
Content.
Wait, if they go what?
Content.
Like that's the lowest that you could be like okay with, right? 3 of 5?
100%. Yeah.
If it's 2, you're super disappointed.
You're
right?
No, you're like pissed.
Right.
I looked at the 9-game stretch, and I thought that they could go 7-2 on the 9, and they already lost their 2.
So James, that 7 of 9. That's hard. That's really hard.
Well, I think you said 6 and 3, right, Sean? Like, and they're already.
Yes, 6 would be where I would want them to be. You just have 1 over. That's where you'd want to be.
Right.
Okay, let's get to our last topic. Let's get to the business of basketball. I don't have the same luster, the same booming voice today for the business of basketball. I don't know why. We're getting down to the wire here. Do you think, because we keep talking about this, like like how far over 500 or whatever. Do you think that the Kings have done enough? Mike Brown has done enough to number one, give Monte McNair the sample size he needs, but number two, to show management and ownership that this is a moment that they need to go for it, that they need help. They could use one or two more top end of the rotation players, and this is a moment where you need to push your chips in, because not only can you set yourself up for this year, but maybe the year after that and the year after that.
Well, define going for it.
A substantial move that adds two, I'm not saying two top three of the rotation guys, or a top three of the rotation guy or a top five of the rotation guy, but certainly two more rotational pieces that are guaranteed rotational pieces, players that 80% of the league would look at as top 8 or 9 of the rotation players.
Here's how I'd look at that. You should always be looking for those, right? If you're trying to get better, like if you're trying to improve, like, again, the goal is not to make the playoffs, the goal is to win the championship. But realistically, right, like you're always trying to get better. So that's the way you answer the question. However, we've had these topics about certain guys that would pop up. Do you sacrifice certain picks to grab a player that ultimately you're kind of overvaluing to really give you a push that may not mean that much in the win column? Certainly it could fit well based on certain situations and things of obvious need. But like, I feel like you have to look beyond that. And that's kind of the things I've been talking about when talking about the likes of a Nerlens Noel, a Mason Plumlee, PJ Washington's, things like that. Like those, to me, just they're moves, but they're moves that could have a certain level of impact. But to me, it's not of the level of impact you should be looking for. You should be looking like beyond that. And like, I just feel like making one of those type of moves is essentially to treading water and doesn't really mean a lot in the win column. It certainly addresses a need now, but you're at a point where you need, like, if you're going to do something, you should think bigger, have bigger aspirations. And if you're hunting those white whales, so to speak, then you're not close enough to the trade deadline yet to where you can just abandon, giving up your white whale search if you're Captain Ahab. That's a Moby Dick reference, Brenden. If you don't know, Moby Dick is a classic literary novel that I think you would really enjoy. But anyway, that's how I would answer that. I don't know that there's those, and again, they may not be capable of making those moves because I think a lot of the players that they'd be willing to spend aren't that attractive to other teams and situations to land that type of talent. So what do you think?
I think the performance we've seen from this team so far Mike Brown has justified or helped justify the Domas Tyrese swap. I think that we've seen that be successful in the short term. And the whole looking at that deal in hindsight is everything that's going to have to do with, obviously, if Domas stays when his contract comes up, but just how good Tyrese becomes, I think, is what that whole conversation is going to revolve around. But when it comes to what Sacramento is trying to do, and that's win games right now and make the postseason and this drought, that clearly that's been a success. And I think that barring things going terrible for this team, like they're in a position where they should absolutely be in the play-in. Like, to me, they should be in a postseason, should be in the postseason and fighting for a playoff opportunity. I don't think that it's at the point where they have to make another move right now to make sure that that is solidified. I think that obviously if the opportunity presents itself and you feel like there's something available to do that, then you should. But I don't know that there should be a crazy amount of pressure around that. I think that if it happens this offseason, that's fine as well. Because there is still another, to me, a third person, a third star, the same or slightly below level of Domas De'Aaron that needs to be added if you want to catapult into this next tier of the Western Conference. And my whole question with the Domas Tyrese swap is just, what is the ceiling of this team and how do you reach that next tier? And at some point you have to take another swing for that third star, in my mind. So if that's not available in something that the front office thinks is reasonable right now, when it comes to this deadline. I don't think that there should be a pressure that it has to happen right now. But I think that, if we're talking by the end of the offseason, maybe my answer is a little different there. But I think that right now they've shown that they are good enough to be in this play-in race at very least. And I think that's kind of what we wanted coming into the year. So if you see an opportunity, then go and do it, but don't feel pressured where it's like, I don't love this deal, but we have to do something. Like, if that's where they're at, then I don't know that the trigger needs to be pulled.
Can I point out one thing? I don't disagree with you, Brenden. Maybe with just so many of the usage of the word should, sure. But I want to point out something. I mean, you're talking about the Kings were 5th in the West. The difference between 5th and 12th right now is 3 games. Yep. So, like, don't fall for fool's gold, right? Like, everything is so jumbled. Like, they could be exceeding expectations. They could be outkicking their coverage, whatever term you want to use. But again, that's 3. You're talking 3 games, right? So this thing could fall apart with a 4-game losing streak. It has possibility to really kind of derail a bit. And again, I expect them fully. That was my expectation when we kickstarted the season, which was playing tournament. And so far, being at 5th, that's fantastic. They're not far. They're only 5.5 out from number 1. So it's like you look at where you are in the standings and how everything is so jumbled up right now, and to be this deep in the season is pretty remarkable. You don't really see that. But I question whether or not they can even get above 5, and certainly they can because everything's so jumbled up. But will they? I don't know. But I think some of these moves that these tertiary moves won't be what's going to be needed for this team. I think this team needs another piece, like a solid piece. So
it needs the CJ McCollum level move at a minimum,
right?
Like, to solidify who they are right now in the league. Like, that's at a minimum. And I don't know what that move is. And I'm not saying CJ. No. I'm saying that level of move that took you from having Zion and Brandon Ingram and some nice pieces, some Valanciunas and stuff like that, but it added that number 2 or number 3 player. That's a deal that would make you like a 4 or 5 in this year and set you up to be a much better team next year and the year after. I'll say this, like, I asked a question, but I'll answer, like, I'll give you what I would think. If they can win 4 out of 5 here right now, or if they can win 5 out of 5, I think the view of the season has to change. And the fact that they are the 24th worst, the 24th rated defense in the NBA, like, Mike Brown has proven enough that he can do some pretty magical stuff with this roster. You need to get him help. And so I would say, yes, you have to go out and do something. And something doesn't mean you just do something to do something. You need to swing for the fences. And if there's a home run out there, you got to take it. But if there's a really solid single and a walk sitting right there, 2 guys that fit into your rotation and actually play in your top 9 of your rotation, I think you have to do that as well. And yeah, I'm not even saying you could even make a big giant move and still need one of those singles or doubles to back it up.
Definitely, especially who knows what's going out, right? I'll say this. To answer the question a little bit differently, I just don't think that there's any more pressure on Monte McNair than there was at the start of the season, if that makes sense. Like, you're enjoying this success based off the things he's built for you. You know what I mean? Like, and again, we're talking success in quotations. Like, we're not even to the trade deadline yet. So you are enjoying some of the things that he's provided for you. Domantas Sabonis, again, that was the franchise altering shift that they went with. They did. It's paying dividends right now. This is great. He's likely going to be an all-star in the West. De'Aaron Fox is playing really, really well. You've added shooting around him. You've added those pieces that he needed. You still need to add, and I don't want to, take, but I just feel like that pressure is always there. I don't think like it intensifies based off of being here in the 5th seed, 3 games separated from the 12th seed. So I just don't think there's any added pressure right there.
Okay. I'll just say I think that James is like, you need to make the CJ trade or your version of that. I think that that's a great comparison, and you have to wait for that deal to be available. But I think that there's multiple examples throughout the league. I think of like Aaron Gordon with Denver. I think of Drew Holiday with Milwaukee. Like I think there's multiple examples throughout. Andrew Wiggins with Golden State Warriors. Like I think there's a lot of examples of that type of deal. And I think in order to jump in that next tier, that's kind of what you're waiting on.
Yeah, I totally agree. I agree with my own thought.
Yeah. And you also you started it by asking, has Mike Brown given Monte McNair much of a sample? I would say yes. I would say yes, he has.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think you can see the holes in the roster, and you can see ways that you could potentially fill those holes, and you can see the levels, the tiers of players that could help you in each of those ways that you could fix a roster. But like, it's tough if you're Monte McNair because you also don't have a contract, and you know this thing is a house of cards. It always is. And if you make the wrong move, you could take a gigantic step backwards and lose your job and put your franchise back a little bit. And I think that those are things that probably shouldn't be thought of, but they're going to be thought of because that's human nature. Okay, let's finish up. Final thoughts. Brenden, do you have any final thoughts?
I don't know if I do.
How many phone calls have you missed from your tenants?
I definitely have missed a couple. I had to text my boss throughout the course of this. So, yeah, about to get right back to all this tree damage.
Yeah. So no final thoughts from Brenden. Okay.
No, he's
Sean?
just a bunch of nothing up in there.
Yeah.
we gotta,
as usual.
We got to find him a new movie, by the way. I don't think we've done that yet.
Oh, okay. Yes. So can you guys, I will watch one tonight if you recommend me a movie that is on Netflix.
It's got to be Netflix only?
I only watch Netflix, guys.
I don't
know why you guys have so many. I don't know how you have so many streaming platforms.
Yeah, I have like 47 different streaming platforms.
I have like a family member's Netflix. I don't pay for any streaming platforms.
Well, hey, that's what it is. I have more friends and family than you, evidently, because I don't pay for any myself.
I thought we were friends, Sean. I don't know what's going on here. It sounds like I should have more.
So recently, I watched the Pale Blue Eye, which I thought was cool.
I have no idea.
It's
I started this last night and fell asleep. Believe it or not.
Yeah, it's an Edgar Allan Poe.
Yes.
He's part of the story.
This is Christian Bale, right?
Yeah, it's Christian Bale.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I don't even know this. All right.
You know what? There is also have you watched Reservoir Dogs?
Of course. Come on now.
Well, I know Sean has. I don't think Brenden has.
Oh, I thought you were asking me.
No, Sean. I know that you're not like you were locked in a closet as a small child.
Right.
I have not watched Reservoir Dogs.
Oh my! Okay,
I was locked in a closet.
Here's unpopular take. Brendan's not going to like it. I already know it. He's not.
Oh no! I think he'd like that. Okay. I would also say Brenden. The Burbs is on Netflix, which is such a spectacular movie. That is so spectacular. The Burbs.
Tom Hanks, he's looking it up. Look at him Googling.
I am.
Young Tom Hanks, but like before he became a serious actor.
Bruce Dern.
Yep. Okay.
Carrie Fisher, the late Carrie Fisher, plays his wife.
Oh.
Yeah. How about that?
Yeah. And of course, Life is on here, which is one of those.
Yeah. Watch that. I was on the set, and it was filmed in portions filmed in the Clarksburg area. Eddie Murphy, Martin Lawrence. I love that movie. You have to watch that. Absolutely. You've never seen Life?
No.
Oh, stop! And do not fall asleep. You look at me. Look at me right here.
I'm going to fall asleep, me, Sean.
Do not fall asleep. Okay, do not fall asleep.
Look at me.
I had to get that off my chest. That's just
pulling. Tough one.
Look at me. Look at me.
By the way, yeah.
Look at me.
Son of a bitch.
Oh, son of a.
Okay. About the upper room and the gun line and so many great things. Great things.
Amazing.
You need to learn that. You need to watch. God damn it, Brenden.
Yeah, Brenden. You just need to fill your brain with useless movie knowledge. That's what's missing in your life.
I will say everyone comes to support him in the comments. They go,
yes.
Stop picking on
Brenden. If anybody talks to me about the pod in person, they're always like, "Don't let him get on you about the movies. I've never seen shit either."
I just like the fact
Most
that
common
people
comment I get.
I just like the fact that people think that we're bullies and that we're done.
Right.
Like Brendan goes and sits on his couch with this stormy
Crying
cloud over his head.
because
Those guys are so mean.
Right.
Lambasted
We
him.
love Brendan. We
We
love
love
Brendan.
We love
And his
Brenden.
plain hot dog
Right.
eating
Right.
Yeah.
ways.
Hey, they had no condiments out yesterday, and everybody wishes they were okay with it. Okay.
Yeah, they had an emergent. We've had a rough go with the food service folks. Jason went on vacation. Jason is one of the server guys, and everything's gone to hell in a handbasket. I feel for him.
It wasn't so bad the other day. I got my sriracha bottle request filled, so then we got that back.
But then it was gone the next day, and we had no more sriracha.
I didn't eat yesterday because I noticed that it was Chinese
it was
food
gone again?
that was
It was
not
a Chipotle
authentic.
day.
So I said I will not be eating that.
It also needed sriracha so bad, and the sriracha was not there. And my bottle of Frank's Red Hot disappeared. It's gone again, so now I got to bring another bottle in. Yeah, this is the complicated life of media members in Sacramento.
Yeah, first
Stuff
world
out here.
problems. First world problems.
Okay, so my final thoughts before we get out of here.
Here we go.
Stay
R.I.P.
safe.
to somebody.
No, the weather's crazy. Stay safe. It's been wild outside. I like white knuckled the whole way home on Saturday night. That was crazy. Getting pushed all over the place. I'm gonna leave
Pushed.
here.
Good use of words there, as opposed to the previous podcast where you
Yes.
got me.
Yeah, which was
Tears in my eyes
ridiculous.
from that one.
And I have to actually go and leave in a few minutes. My sons have a soccer game tonight in this weather. So they will be playing under the lights for a 7:15 start in the torrential downpour.
But you're not playing, coaching, or officiating?
No, but I'm driving like a bunch of kids. My son, one is playing and one is coaching.
I would pull up. I would get in the car, gather around everyone, pull up. Now get out, and I would situate my car so I could see the field in such a way and root from there.
No,
inside the car.
I will be out there in misery
in the elements
because that's the way it goes. No, that's what happens. That's what happens.
This is why I don't have children.
All right.
This is
one of the reasons. Just one reason why.
That I know of. Children that I know of.
Children that I know of. Okay. I think that's going to do it. We got all of our final thoughts in, Sean. Yes. Oh, yeah. You went through movies. Okay. I think that's going to do
Bottle Rock lineup. Bottle Rock lineup. Brendan, did you like that?
You keep pulling us
I didn't
back
see
in.
this. We're talking about it a
You got to
little
look
bit the
at
other
it.
day.
Well, we can talk about the next podcast. I'll be there all 3 days, so come on through.
We'll talk about it on Thursday.
All right. We can compare it to Coachella, which was trash.
Trash. All right. I'm looking forward to this, Sean. You know, I need to go to one of these things with you, Sean. That would be fun.
Oh, you would see. It would be an education.
Maybe. I have actually lived a long life at this point, Sean.
No. The education of like you'd learn about Sean. Like, to talk about myself in the third person.
That doesn't sound fun.
Nobody goes full J.J. Hickson, Sean Cunningham.
You think you know Sean Cunningham, then you go to a music festival and see what a goonie is, and it's good times.
All right. Okay, well, that's going to do it for this edition of the King's Beat podcast. If you're still listening or watching on YouTube, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe. Give us a rating and review wherever you listen to your podcasts. And thanks for joining us on this ride. It's been a good time. Kings are 21-18. Is that what it is? I think 21-18.
Yep.
21-18. They're playing okay, not great, but still hovering around that 500 mark, a little bit over. So for Fox 40, Sean Cunningham and Brenden Nunes from the Kings Pulse podcast, I'm James Hammond, Kings Insider for ESPN 1320 and the Kings Beat. See you later this week.